I think we will go on to our panel to get a reaction now to what Matthew and Philip have told us. And I am going to come to Carsten first. If I could just find your resume, Carsten, if I may. Carsten is the humanitarian director of Oxfam International, and he is executive in residence at the INSTEAD Business. Sorry? INSEAD Business School Social Innovation Centre, and is also a board member of the Sphere Project. And Carsten has worked in humanitarian aid since 1994. He's led several leading humanitarian organisations in major disaster responses, including the Rwanda conflict, the Balkans conflict, the Gujarat earthquake, the Ethiopia drought, the Iraq conflict, the Israel-occupied territories conflict in Gaza, the Darfur conflict, the Asia tsunami, the Kashmir earthquake, Lebanon conflict, South Asian floods, the Horn of Africa drought and famine, Sahel drought, Mali conflict, and currently the Syria conflict. And you're still smiling, you're still here. Oh, that's amazing, brilliant. So his recent positions also include Global Head of Emergency Operations of CARE, International and Country Director of Sudan, and in the Norwegian Refugee Council. So, Carsten, if you could give us your thoughts. Are they personal thoughts, or are they thoughts from an institutional Oxfam perspective? Maybe you could...
It's going to be a mix, and I'll try to separate between the two when I try to make that clear what is what.
Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and it's a pleasure to be here, and it's quite a challenge to reply to that in 7 minutes in any meaningful way, and thereby still proving to be coherent after all these exposures. Let me start with the Joint Standards Initiative and the concept of standards and how we apply them. As you mentioned, I started in '94 with the Rwanda response, working in Eastern Congo, and met the predecessors of the Ombudsman projects and so on that led to the initiatives that now tried under the Joint Standards Initiative to come together. Then we spoke about the fact that we didn't have industry-wide standards, and we had a huge problem because of that, because everybody was working to own internal standards or without any standards at all. Now we're almost 20 years later, and now we have just heard we have 100 quality or more quality accountability initiatives. It sounds like we have gone from one extreme to the other. And it also sounded like from one of the presentations, that's in itself a problem. There's a proliferation and we can't manage that. No humanitarian work in the field can't possibly handle all of this. Unfortunately, I think the reality is not that black and white. There is a process of professionalization clear in the humanitarian sector. And as part of that, I see two trends. One is specialization, which by nature is a good thing. And as such, results also in very specialized sets of standards that have been established, industry standards for particularly specialized sub-work areas in the humanitarian field. And then on the other side, you have also an industry built around the industry that is almost like siphoning off resources of the humanitarian sphere, and that's a private comment, that kind of like lives off trying to tell the humanitarians how to do their work better. And some of that, of course, is useful, but you see there is also a proliferation. There's so much out there that it's really hard for humanitarians to follow all of this. And that's where quite a lot of this duplication is coming from. So the truth is somewhere in the middle. Some of that is really necessary and it is part of the professionalization. And some of it constitutes a problem because it's multiplication drawing on the attention of the people who are just trying to stay sane in the responses that we just noted. And now the JSI is in that process trying to reflect and making sense of some of the major initiatives. So when I hear, for example, that there is the preference in the wider sector as part of the consultation and looking at how mandatory verification system for agreed upon harmonized standards can help that, then that is one point of view which I can have a lot of sympathy for. But I also need to say when I'm speaking, and that's my hat as a member of the Sphere board, Sphere board very clearly says, after wide consultation with its constituencies, is it will remain a voluntary standard. It's very important. That's what why Sphere is the most and commonly used initiative out there. 9 out of 10 humanitarian workers are using Sphere. That's what the stakeholder consultation said. And if you digger into it, you know, the majority of the humanitarian workers actually doesn't know more than 3 sets of standards or quality accountability initiatives. So that myth of, you know, the proliferation is the problem has also been a little bit debunked in the consultation process. It is a problem, but actually we need to drill much deeper, finding out why are standards known and not properly used. Why are they sometimes used under some circumstances effectively and under some other circumstances by the same humanitarian workers, same organization, they are not properly used. And that's where we need to drill much deeper, and that's where we probably need to have a much more of a monitoring evaluation approach to finding the problem. Read our own evaluations of organizations. We are doing this kind of stuff. We're doing real-time evaluations, we do after-action reviews, and we look into how have we met our objectives, our ambitions, and our standards, and learn from why did it work here and why did it not work. So that consultation asking 2,000 humanitarian workers has been a great step forward, but it doesn't let us off the hook from drilling much deeper understanding what it actually takes to implement them and what circumstances need to be met to meet them. How do our donors fit in there who say, yes, implement Sphere standards, but then only give us half the money that we need in order to do it? You know, how, you know, governments that put restrictions on us and the turnover that we're talking about. But awareness, as we said, seems not to be really the problem. Awareness is part of the problem. Do we really understand how to contextualize standards? Do we really know how we make them culturally, climatic, and whatever appropriate in the context, use them and apply them and measure them? Is our knowledge deep enough of all of our staff that are implementing it? These are the questions that we still need to answer. Where JSI can help us, harmonizing, rationalizing it, bring these standards into a better context where they support each other rather than compete with each other, absolutely. For example, bring the Good Humanitarian Donor Initiative in. Make that one star in the Star Alliance of, you know, quality accountability initiatives and make them accountable to the same systems. That would be an idea. Will they play along? I don't know, huh? But I mean, it's worth a try, and I think it's quite important. And then there's the other side. What discussed here is the certification. Now I'm speaking as humanitarian director of Oxfam. We have a very clear position on that. We like certification. We want to support it. There's a very complicated world out there. There are a lot of new actors, and we are trying to put more responsibility on governments to take responsibility for serving the people. They are legally responsible for providing humanitarian assistance and prevent disasters to begin with. And we try to hold them to account. But who are we to do so? Who are they dealing with? Already among the NGOs. There are NGOs out there who don't recognize our code of conduct. Yeah, without any finger pointing. I mean, there are organizations who simply say, we don't know it. There are others who are saying, sorry, but you know, our God is not written in there. We like these 10 principles, but as long as our God isn't mentioned, that doesn't fly. We come up with our own code of conduct. So the 10 humanitarian principles that a lot of us professional organizations consider as sacrosanct, they're not applied by them. And now you set yourself into the shoes of a government that we say we hold you to account to ensure professional services are delivered, and they say, wow, hold on a second. Unfortunately, this is now a disaster with CNN effect, and we have 500 of you organizations showing up here, and we don't know who you are. We don't know what you bring to the table. We don't know to which standards you are working. Yet somehow we are responsible for you, that you meet our responsibilities to our people. And how do you do that without being very clear on who you are, what you represent, what standards you're working against? And I think that's where certification can play a role in making that much more clear who we are, what principles we're working for, what standards we're trying to meet, what role we intend to play in the crisis. And I think this is very important, because that's the other side of proliferation, is the proliferation of actors, the private sector and so on, which were mentioned here. So in a nutshell, we see those processes connected, but they are not necessarily in the way they are currently developing the same. Oxfam will pursue certification. Internally, definitely. We look internally, we have about a dozen Oxfams that are engaged in humanitarian responses. And we have agreed last year that we will have an internal certification process that will decide which Oxfam is qualified to do humanitarian response and where and when, and which one isn't. That's how we use internal certification, and we ideally want to connect that to an external process like developed by SCHR if it takes a shape and form that allows us to do so. So we will support it, but we have yet to see what comes out of it. Thanks.